Those two questions, in that order, produce fundamentally better PIQ selection than the alternative of reading the 8 prompts and picking the 4 that seem easiest to write. I want to tell you about a student I worked with. Genuinely strong applicant, high GPA, competitive courses, deeply involved in robotics all 4 years of high school. Team captain, national competitions, the whole picture. When we started working on his UC application, he had already drafted his 4 personal insight questions. Response 1 was about leadership in robotics. Response 2 was about creative problem solving in robotics. Response 3 was about his greatest skill, which he defined as engineering, meaning robotics. Response 4 was about a significant challenge he'd overcome, which was a robotics competition where his team's design failed. 4 well-written responses, all about the same thing. That's the mistake I'm going to walk you through in this video. Because at UCLA, Berkeley, San Diego, Santa Barbara, that student's 4 well-written responses produce a one-dimensional portrait. And a one-dimensional portrait at those campuses is what admissions committees reject. Here's what most PIQ advice on the internet misses, and I've read a lot of it, because when families come in to me late in the cycle, I want to know what they were told before they got here. Most PIQ advice teaches you to write a strong response to each individual prompt. That is table stakes. That is the beginning of the work, not the end of it. The actual strategic work is above the individual prompts. It's the question of what the 4 responses together reveal about who this student is. UC readers do not evaluate the 4 PIQs independently. They read them together as one integrated portrait of the applicant. The 4 responses either complement each other and reveal a full person, or they overlap and reveal a flat one. The robotics student had 4 strong essays and a flat portrait. That's a strategic problem that no amount of essay revision can fix. It requires a different starting point. The good news is it's completely fixable. The move that fixes it is a specific strategic exercise families can do before their student writes a single PIQ response. That exercise is what the next 10 minutes are about. Let me start with the central principle, then I'll show you how to apply it. The UC application asks students to choose 4 out of 8 PIQ prompts. Each prompt is capped at 350 words. The same 4 responses go to every UC campus the student applies to. So, a student applying to UCLA, Davis, Irvine, and Santa Cruz sends the same 4 responses to all 4 campuses. Because the same 4 responses do all the work across every UC application, those 4 responses have to accomplish something specific. They have to tell a UC reader who the student is, not who they are as a robotics competitor, or who they are as a student council member, or who they are as a single dimension. It's about who they are as a whole person. That means the 4 responses need to reveal different dimensions of the student. The academic dimension, the character dimension, the community dimension, the distinctive talent dimension. Here's the principle stated as clearly as I can put it. The 4 PIQs should tell 4 different stories about the student, not 4 versions of the same story. The robotics student was writing 4 versions of the same story, 4 different angles on robotics. Individually strong, cumulatively flat. What UC readers saw when they read all 4 was that the student whose entire high school experience was robotics. And that reads as narrow even when the student is genuinely accomplished, because the reader has no window into anything else the student cares about or has done or thinks about. The alternative approach for that same student, the one we ended up using, leadership in robotics for prompt 1, creative side through music because he was a self-taught guitar player. Significant challenge through a family situation he had genuinely worked through. Favorite academic subject as philosophy because he had discovered it independently and it had reshaped how he thought about engineering. Same student, same accomplishments, same underlying material. 4 completely different responses that reveal 4 different dimensions of who he actually is. That's what UC readers respond to. Let me give you the practical tool. I call it the 4-dimension framework, and it's the exercise I walk families through before they draft any individual PIQ. Dimension 1, the academic dimension. What does the student care about intellectually? What subject generally interests them beyond grades? What have they read, explored, or pursued independently? Dimension 2, the personal character dimension. What has the student navigated, overcome, or grown through? What family situation, personal challenge, or life circumstance has shaped who they are? Dimension 3, community or relational dimension. Where has the student contributed to something bigger than themselves? A team, a community, a family responsibility, a group they belong to? Dimension 4, the distinctive talent dimension. What is the student known for? What specific skill or talent or area of strength distinguishes them from other applicants? Notice what this framework does. It forces you to identify 4 different things about the student before you look at the 8 prompts. The prompt selection comes second, after you know what dimensions you want to reveal. The mistake most families make is they start with the prompts. They read all 8, they pick the 4 that seem easiest to write, and then they write them. That backwards process is exactly why you end up with 4 PIQs about robotics. Every prompt can technically be answered with robotics content if the student is deeply enough involved. So, if you start with the prompts, the strongest material dominates every response. Starting with the 4 dimensions changes everything. You know before you look at the prompts that you need 1 response about your academic dimension, 1 about your character dimension, 1 about your community dimension, and 1 about your distinctive talent dimension. Now the question becomes, which prompt gives you the best surface for each dimension? And that's where the 8 prompt list becomes a strategic tool instead of a menu. For most students, prompt 6, favorite academic subject, is the natural surface for the academic dimension. Prompt 5, significant challenge, is often the natural surface for the personal character dimension. Prompt 7, contribution to your community, or Prompt 1, leadership, work for the community dimension. Prompt 2, creative side, or Prompt 3, greatest talent or skill, work for the distinctive talent dimension. These are defaults, not rules. Different students have different strong material. A student whose family dimensions has shaped them profoundly might use Prompt 4, educational barrier, for the character dimension instead of Prompt 5. A student whose creative expression is genuinely their community engagement might collapse dimensions 2 and 3. The framework is the starting point for thinking. It's not a fill-in-the-blank exercise. I want to be honest about one exception, because it applies to a specific kind of student, and I don't want the framework to sound more rigid than it is. Some students have a genuinely central identity. A serious classical musician who has practiced 4 hours a day since middle school and whose whole life orbits around that pursuit. A competitive athlete whose journey through injury and recovery has been the central experience of their high school years. A research student who has worked on a single sustained project with a university mentor and produced real results. For those students, the portfolio principle does not require them to artificially diversify away from what is genuinely central to their identity. 4 PIQs that all connect to the central pursuit can absolutely work if they reveal different dimensions of that pursuit and of the student navigating it. The distinction is between intentional concentration and accidental repetition. Intentional concentration is the musician whose 4 PIQs over the discipline of daily practice, the family sacrifice their pursuit required, the community they built through youth orchestra, and their creative interpretation of a specific composer. Same central identity, 4 different dimensions. Accidental repetition is the robotics student I described at the start. The one who wrote 4 different angles on robotics because that's what he was most involved in. Not because he had thought about which dimensions of himself the UCs wanted to see. Can you name the 4 different dimensions your 4 responses reveal? If yes, whether the responses share a central topic or not, the portfolio is working. If no, if the answer is they're all about the same thing and I'm not sure what different dimensions they reveal, the portfolio is not working, regardless of how well any individual response is written. Okay. Here's what to do with all of this. Before your student writes a single PIQ response, sit down and do the dimension mapping exercise. 2 questions in order. Question 1, what 4 dimensions of your student do you want the UC to see? Not what 4 prompts do you want them to answer. What 4 dimensions of who your student is? Question 2, which prompt gives the strongest surface for each dimension? based on the specific material your student actually has to draw from. Those two questions, in that order, produce fundamentally better PIQ selection than the alternative of reading the 8 prompts and picking the 4 that seem easiest to write. Then, and only then, does the writing work begin. Draft each response with the dimensions in mind. Ask whether the response is revealing the dimension you selected the prompt to reveal, or whether it drifted back into safer territory. Most first drafts drift. That's normal. The revision work is bringing each response back to the specific dimension it's supposed to reveal. The 5 structural features that make individual PIQ responses strong: specificity, teenage voice, unique observation, restraint, and endings that don't state the moral, all matter, but they matter within the portfolio structure. A specifically written response that reveals the wrong dimension is still a portfolio problem. Portfolio mapping fixes strategic level quality. Both matter. Portfolio mapping matters first. One practical timing note before I close. The portfolio mapping exercise should happen in spring of junior year, not summer between junior and senior year. Here's why. If you do the mapping in spring of junior year, you can still make choices during your students' last months of high school that produce better PIQ material. Maybe you realize your student's community dimension is thin, and you take that as a signal to be more intentional about community involvement in summer and fall. Maybe you realize your student's distinctive talent dimension isn't showing up anywhere in their activities, and you help them find opportunities to develop it. If you do mapping in July before senior year, you're mapping what already exists. That's still valuable, but it removes the option of adjusting course to strengthen dimensions that are underrepresented. The earlier the mapping, the more strategic latitude you have. Even freshman and sophomore families can benefit from asking the dimension question. What 4 dimensions of my student do we want colleges to eventually see? That question shapes activity choices, summer plans, and how families think about the development of their student's profile, years before the actual PIQ writing begins. The PIQ portfolio strategy is the specific move that separates PIQ submissions that reveal a full person from PIQ submissions that reveal a partial one. Individual essay quality is necessary. Portfolio strategy is what makes the individual quality add up to something a UC reader can actually get to know. Our comprehensive UC System Decoded guide at premiercollegeguide.com has the full portfolio strategy walkthrough, including the strategic pairings for each of the 8 prompts and the recurring failure patterns that produce weak portfolios. Link is in the description. If you want to go deeper on individual PIQ essay quality, specifically, the 7-dimension self-assessment tool at premiercollegeguide.com walks students through their own draft using the same rubric I use when reviewing students' work. I'll see you in video 4, where we're going to break down the California Community College transfer path that almost nobody talks about, and how it produces UC degrees from Berkeley, UCLA, and Davis for California families at a fraction of the 4-year cost. Thanks for watching. If this was useful, subscribe. And if you know a family with a junior at home right now, forward them this video. The portfolio mapping is worth doing now, not in July. Premier College Guidance, College Decoded.